U.S. defense officials say this is the real deal. Russia test firing its new high-speed hypersonic missile, a missile that the U.S. military currently cannot defend against. Russian President Vladimir Putin pulling no punches on his intent.
The new avant-garde missile system is invincible against today's and future air and missile defense systems of the potential enemy. This is a big success and a great achievement.
If the weapons work as advertised, there is no current defense against them.
Shanahan warns the U.S. needs to be able to detect the fast-flying missile much further away than current radar systems can handle. The U.S. has to detect it thousands, not hundreds of miles away because of its high-speed approach. The Pentagon may spend more than $1 billion trying to develop and field its own capabilities. The Russians are making significant yet unproven claims about their missiles, saying it's capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. It flies up to 20 times faster than the speed of sound. It can adjust altitude and direction to avoid detection. Putin says it's invincible.
We're going to need a different set of sensors in order to see the hypersonic threats. Our adversaries know that.
There's another system, an underwater system that the Russians are working on and that Putin has been bragging about. It's called the Poseidon. It is a nuclear-powered, that's right, it's a torpedo with a nuclear reactor in it that can also carry nuclear warheads. It is very long range, up to about 6,000 miles. It can travel at depths of up to 3,000 feet, and it's very fast. Somewhere the estimates are between 55 and 100 knots, 55 to 100 miles an hour underwater. The idea for this weapon is to go after large ships like aircraft carriers or shore installations. And again, this is not a system for which we have adequate defenses right now. Very worrisome. This is in testing right now, not in the fleet, not as far along as the avant-garde. Increasing their capabilities throughout the whole year. Back in March, they tested a new intercontinental ballistic missile called the Satan II, which can carry up to 26 independently targeted warheads, re-entry vehicles, if you will, 10 of them of a large size. In September, back in the fall, they did war games with China. Now, these war games in the East have typically been done to deter China. They've been about sort of making sure China knew not to mess with Russia. This year, they worked with China to send a message to the West and to the United States in particular. Back in October, of course, they've now, using satellite imagery, we've been able to tell they've been upgrading military installations in Kaliningrad on the Baltic Sea, right on the doorstep of NATO. And then in November, they tested a satellite system called the Nesting Doll. Now, what's really interesting about this is not so much the actual satellite itself, but the little satellite that comes out that it puts into space outside of it. Now, the Russians will tell you this is about being able to work on satellites, that this little guy is meant to go fix and repair other satellites that they have in orbit, but the Pentagon is worried that what it could be is actually a targeting mechanism to go after Western satellites, either with lasers or maybe even to crash into them. So the Russians have been very busy this year.
Wolf, tonight Putin is on America's doorstep with nuclear-capable bombers that can fly at twice the speed of sound. A worrisome development for Washington, considering the capability of the Russian bombers, which can fly twice the speed of sound.
This bomber was designed to do both high-altitude and low-altitude penetration of airspace with nuclear weapons, to deliver nuclear weapons on target. This aircraft was designed to be an offensive-capable weapon to get into our airspace during the Cold War.
We're told, as you say, they can travel at 20 times the speed of sound. They can be mounted on top of an ICBM and can carry nuclear weapons of up to 2 megatons. But at incredible speeds, the avant-garde so-called glide system means it's also highly maneuverable. It can make sharp turns and take unpredictable courses on the way to its target, making it more difficult to intercept. And this is perhaps its kind of intercontinental missile system that at the very least is difficult to defend against. Indeed, boasted that the avant-garde was invulnerable to not only existing missile defense systems, but potentially future ones as well, although I should stress.
Russia must develop the capability to destroy the U.S. in a single swift blow if it wants to persuade the Americans to end the nuclear arms race and return to the negotiating table to produce nuclear weapons with a yield of more than 100 megatons. If areas with critically dangerous geophysical conditions in the U.S., like the Yellowstone supervolcano or the San Andreas Fault, are targeted by those warheads, such an attack guarantees the destruction of the U.S. as a state and the entire transnational elite, he said. The production of around 40 or 50 such mega warheads for ICBMs or extra long-range torpedoes would make sure that at least a few of them reach their target, no matter how a nuclear conflict between the US and Russia develops.
Vladimir Putin firing off with more warnings to the West, and then Russian state television coming out with this list of U.S. military facilities that Moscow will target in the event of a nuclear strike. They could hit these targets in less than 5 minutes. The targets include the Pentagon, the presidential retreat in Camp David, Maryland. So they would target that too. They let it be known.
You know Vladimir Putin, you think he's a killer?
Mm-hmm. I do.
So what price must he pay?
The price he's going to pay, well, you'll see shortly.
Our relationship will look different. We will be direct. We will speak out on areas where we have concerns. Certainly, the Russians will be held accountable for the actions that they have taken.
Earlier today, Russian President Vladimir Putin blamed Washington for escalating tensions in Eastern Europe on Monday. The U.S. announced it's putting 8,500 American troops on high alert. What does that mean? It means that they're ready to deploy at short notice to NATO countries.
Ukrainian troops manning the front lines, the U.S. is preparing to step in if needed. Around 8,500 American troops have now been put on higher alert, ready to deploy at short notice to NATO countries in Eastern Europe.
This is about sending a strong message that we're committed to NATO.
NATO is reinforcing its eastern flank because Russia has 100,000 troops on the border with Ukraine. Moscow says it has no plans to invade, but many don't believe that. In addition to putting troops on alert, the U.S. is sending $200 million in emergency military assistance and another shipment of military equipment. For its part, Russia says it's watching America's actions with, quote, great concern.
A Russian military show of force today on the country's western border with Ukraine, and no signs that Vladimir Putin plans to back down. That's why President Biden, shopping today at a small business in Washington, says he may soon deploy to Eastern Europe some of the almost 9,000 U.S. troops he's put on heightened alert.
I may be moving some of those troops in the nearer term, just because it takes time. And again, it's not provocative.
Several thousand U.S. troops already in Europe also could be repositioned, but the growing Allied response force is still no match for Putin's roughly 100,000 troops on the ground. At this point, almost completely encircling Ukraine. The White House says an invasion is imminent, and Mr. Biden summoned his top national security advisors for a meeting on the crisis, saying he would specifically target Putin with economic sanctions if the Russian leader invades.
If he were to move in with all those forces, it would be the largest invasion since World War II. It would change the world.
The Russians reiterated today they have no plans to attack. But the administration, fearing Putin could cut off fuel shipments to run through Ukraine in the coming weeks, is now working with oil and gas suppliers around the globe to ensure there is adequate supply. Some Republicans say they fear Mr. Biden is still moving too slowly against Putin.
Even when they're taking the right steps now, those right steps tend to be half measures, and they're certainly much too late.
But Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, a frequent critic of the president, has a different view.
It appears to me the administration is moving in the right direction.
We will uphold the principle of NATO's open door, and that's, as I've said repeatedly in recent weeks, a commitment that we're bound to. And so the document, as I said, makes very clear some of the basic principles that we are standing by, committed to, and will uphold. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, and that's very much what we've been doing. So we've been clear to Russia that there are two paths, a diplomatic one, but also a path of defense and deterrence, and if Russia chooses aggression, a path that will lead to massive consequences. And so even as we've been engaging in the diplomacy, which is my job and responsibility, we have been very resolutely preparing for Russia to take the other path, the path of aggression.
History has shown that engagement on these issues can provide real security for everyone. So we need practical measures that will make a real difference. As a first step, we are proposing mutual briefings on exercises and nuclear policies in the NATO-Russia.
Зараз всі новини та інформаційний простір сповнені схожими повідомленнями про війну з Росією, про те, що вторгнення може початись прямо завтра, будь-якої миті. Ці ризики існують вже не один день. І вони не стали більшими. Більшим став ажіотаж навколо них. І зараз активно нападають не на нашу землю, а на ваші нерви, щоб у вас було постійне відчуття тривоги, а також емоції інвесторів та кон'юнктура для бізнесу. Послабити Україну, щоб примусити до поступок, в гонитві за хайпом не допомагати ворогу. Повідомляти щодня про те, що війна може бути завтра. Це точно її не зупинить. Всім нашим партнерам бути дієвими і не на словах. Важлива не лише інформація про те, що може зробити Росія, а й про те, що в цьому випадку буде робити світ. Без абстрактних їм це не минеться, а називаючи конкретні санкції, конкретні заходи, на які готовий весь світ. Ми про все знаємо, ми до всього готові, але робимо все, аби врешті нам це не знадобилося. Робимо все для вирішення дипломатичним шляхом. Робимо все для настання миру в Україні. Що робити вам? Тільки одне – зберігати спокій, холодну голову, впевненість у своїх силах, у своїй армії, у нашій Україні. Не накручувати самих себе, на все реагувати мудро.
Russia is taking full advantage of climate change to try and shore up its military power. Now, it's testing new weapons in the Arctic in areas where there's been quite a bit of ice melt. And what the Russians are doing there could have, in fact, major implications for the United States and other Western allies.
Certainly, and the ice is melting significantly faster than many scientists, diplomats or military experts had in fact expected. And yes, you're right, there's been a lot of talk about Russia doing things, but here they are actually implementing significant military maneuvers, heightening in the last months or so with the test and completion of tests in the months ahead of these new super weapons long advertised by the Kremlin head, Russian President Vladimir Putin, but often thought by US officials to simply be too terrifying to ever be possible. But there are signs they're moving to fruition, and just recently too, all of this enables Russia's stronger hold on what's called the Northern Sea Route, potentially a route from Asia to Europe that's half the length almost of that of the Suez Canal. Remember that in trouble recently. Yet again, another factor increasing competition for control on this new ice-free sea lane.
It's a new frontier, expanding for all the wrong reasons, with pushy neighbours rushing in. Russia is seeing the Arctic ice melt fast and filling the gap with a military build-up, some of it on Alaska's doorstep, not seen since the Cold War. Key is a new generation of superweapons like the Poseidon, 120-mile-an-hour nuclear-propelled stealth torpedo. It's designed, say Russian officials, to sneak past US coastal defenses and detonate a warhead, causing a radioactive tsunami to hit the east coast with contaminated water. Experts told CNN the weapon is, quote, very real. It'll be tested in the summer near Norway, whose intelligence head said it's not only the ecological damage that could be bad.
It is in a testing phase. It's a strategic system and it's aimed at targets and has then an influence far beyond the region in which they test it currently.
Some said Russian President Vladimir Putin was fantasizing when he revealed this and other new weapons like the hypersonic Zircon missile in 2018. But continuing development and tests make them very real.
Russia is projecting an image that it's developing new technologies, and this, of course, is destabilizing the strategic balance.
They are now starting to develop those capabilities that could reach the United States and its NATO allies.
That's not all Russia is up to. CNN has obtained satellite images revealing the persistent buildup of Russian bases along its northern coastline, part of what a US State Department official called a military challenge. Close to Alaska, at Providenia and Wrangel Island, are two new radar stations with, stationed in Anadyr, a quick reaction alert force of bombers and jets. West in Kotelny, a thin strip of land has seen, over 7 years, the slow growth of a large airstrip. And in the Gurskoy, in the northernmost point, is another base that's sprung up since 2015, one of several in the Arctic decorating the colours of the Russian flag. Nagorskoye and the nearby airfield of Rogachevo are both home to MiG-31 jets, recent arrivals. And further west at Alenya Guba on the Kola Peninsula, over the past 4 years, experts believe a storage facility has slowly been built up for the Poseidon torpedo. There are new resources to exploit under the ice, yes, but Russia released this video in January of the first time a freighter got through the ice in the east in the thick winter to sell a new trade route along its northern coast. It's a possible moneymaker for the Kremlin, cutting the current journey time from Asia to Europe through the Suez Canal nearly in half. US officials voiced concern to CNN that Russia is already demanding ships use Russian crews and get permission to cross it. In response to Russia's build-up, the US has sent B-1 bombers to fly out of and Marines to train in Norway. Who gets there first makes the rules, they say.
And there is a fear, I think, possibly that the sheer pace in which this build-up is occurring with unpredictable things like that Poseidon torpedo, a terrifying notion, frankly, could lead to miscalculation, could lead to simply an escalation there, which nobody needs. And the important point to realise, frankly, is that this is a part of the world unaccessible, bleak, desolate for millennia, which is now suddenly a place where people have to calculate what they might militarily need to do or be able to do.
The extraordinary thing about it is that any kind of plane can now land here, which is really important, of course, for the Russian military in terms of getting troops up here and supplies too.
Well, they've brought out all the toys now. These are the Bastion anti-ship missiles, and this is a bit of a show of Russian might.
Период после Второй мировой войны, очень длительный период, считающийся практически десятилетиями, 70-летием. Таких сил здесь никогда не было.
То есть это реальная угроза все-таки?
Ну, несомненно, это так.
Up here.